Welcome to 1,000 Nights and One Night. Now, when it was the 496th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the angel said to Bulukiya when describing the serpent, and were it not for the fear of the Most Highest, this serpent would surely have swallowed up all that is above it, air and fire, and the angel and his burden without sensing it." When Allah created this serpent, he said to it by inspiration, "I will give thee somewhat to keep from me, so open thy mouth." The serpent replied, "Do whatso thou wilt," and opened his mouth. And God placed hell into his maw, saying, "Keep it until the day of resurrection. When that time comes, the Almighty will send his angels with chains to bring hell, to bind it until the day when all men shall meet. And the Lord will order hell to go open its gates, and there will issue therefrom sparks bigger than the mountains." When Bulukiya heard these things, he wept with sore weeping, and taking leave of the angel, fared on westward, till he came in sight of two creatures sitting before a great shut gate. As he drew near, he saw that one of the gatekeepers had the semblance of a lion, and the other that of a bull. So he saluted them, and they returned his salam, and inquired who and whence he was, and whither he was bound. Quoth he, "I am of the sons of Adam, a wanderer for the love of Mohammed, whom Allah assain and save, and I have strayed from my way." Then he asked them what they were, and what was the gate before which they sat. And they answered, "We are the guardians of this gate. Thou seest, and we have no other business than the praise and hallowing of Allah and the invocation of blessings on Mohammed, whom may he bless and keep." Bulukiya wondered, and he asked them, "What is within the gate?" And they answered, "We wot not." Then quoth he, "I conjure you, by the truth of your glorious Lord, open me to the gate, that I may see what is therein." Quoth they, "We cannot, and none may open this gate of all created beings except Gabriel, the faithful one, with whom be peace." Then Bulukiya lifted up his voice in supplication to Allah, saying, "O Lord, send me thy messenger Gabriel, the faithful one, to open for me this gate, that I may see what is therein." And the Almighty gave ear unto his prayer, and commanded the archangel to descend to earth, and open to him the gate of the meeting place of the two seas. So Gabriel descended, and saluting Bulukiya, opened the gate to him, saying, "Enter this door, for Allah commanded me to open it to thee." So he entered, and Gabriel locked the gate between them, and flew back to heaven. When Bulukiya found himself within the gate, he looked, and behold, a vast ocean, half salt and half fresh, bounded on every side by mountain ranges of red ruby, whereon he saw angels singing the praises of the Lord and hallowing him. So he went up to them and saluted them, and having received a return of his salam, questioned them of the sea and the mountains. Replied they, "This place is situated under the Arsh, or empyreal heaven, and this ocean causes the flux and flow of all seas of the world, and we are appointed to distribute them and drive them to the various parts of the earth, the salt to the salt, and the fresh to the fresh, and this is our employ until the day of doom. As for the mountain ranges, they serve to limit and to contain the waters. But thou, whence comest thou, and whither art thou bound?" So he told them his story, and asked them of the road. They bade him traverse the surface of the ocean which lay before him. So he anointed his feet with the juice of the herb he had with him, and taking leave of the angels, set out upon the face of the sea, and sped on over the water night and day. And as he was faring, behold, he met a handsome youth journeying along like himself, whereupon he greeted him, and he returned his greeting. After they parted, he espied 4 great angels wayfaring over the face of the sea, and their going was like the blinding lightning. So he stationed himself in their road, and when they came up to him, he saluted them and said to them, "I ask you, by the Almighty, the Glorious, to tell me your names and whither you are bound." Replied the first angel, "My name is Gabriel, and these my companions are called Israfil and Mikal and Azrahil." There appeared in the east a mighty dragon, which hath laid waste 1,000 cities, and devoured their inhabitants. Wherefore Allah Almighty hath commanded us to go to him, and seize him, and cast him into Jahannam. Bulukiya marveled at the vastness of their stature, and fared on as before, days and nights, till he came to an island, where he landed, and walked about for a while. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 498th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Bulukiya landed on the island, and walked about for a while, till he saw a comely young man with light shining from his visage, sitting weeping and lamenting between two built tombs. So he saluted him, and he returned his salutation. And Bulukiya said to him, Who art thou? And what are these two built tombs between which thou sittest, and wherefore this wailing? He looked at him, and wept with sore weeping, till it drenched his clothes with his tears. Then said, Know thou, O my brother, mine is a marvellous story, and a wondrous. But I would have thee sit by me, and first tell me thy name, and thine adventures, and who thou art, and what brought thee hither. After which I will in turn relate to thee my history. So Bulukiya sat down by him, and related to him all that had befallen him from his father's death, adding, Such is my history, the whole of it, and Allah alone knoweth what will happen to me after this. When the youth heard his story, he sighed and said, O thou unhappy! How few things thou hast seen in thy life compared with mine! Know, O Bulukiya, that unlike thyself, I have looked upon our Lord Solomon in his life, and have seen things past count or reckoning. Indeed, my story is strange, and my case out of range, and I would have thee abide with me till I tell thee my history, and acquaint thee how I came to be sitting here. Hearing this, Hasib again interrupted the Queen of the Serpents, and said to her, Allah upon thee, O Queen, release me, and command one of thy servants, carry me forth to the surface of the earth, and I will swear an oath to thee that I will never enter the Hammam bath as long as I live. But she said, This is a thing which may not be, nor will I believe thee upon thine oath. When he heard this, he wept, and all the serpents wept on his account, and took to interceding for him with their queen, saying, We beseech thee, bid one of us carry him forth to the surface of the earth, and he will swear thee an oath never to enter the bath his life long. Now, when Yamalaka, for which was the queen's name, heard their appeal, she turned to Hasib, and made him swear to her an oath, after which she bade a serpent carry him forth to the surface of the earth. The serpent made ready, but as she was about to go away with him, he turned to Queen Yamalaka and said, I would fain have thee tell me the history of the youth whom Bulukiya sat sitting between two tombs. So she said, Know, O Hasib, that when Bulukiya sat down by the youth, and told him his tale from first to last, in order that the other might also account for his adventures, and explain the cause of his sitting between the two tombs. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 499th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the queen continued. When Bulukiya ended his recount, the youth said, How few things of marvel hast thou seen in thy life, O unhappy! Now I have looked upon our Lord Solomon while he was yet living, and I have witnessed wonders beyond compt and conception. And he began to relate his story of Janshah. Now, on my brother, that my sire was a king called Tegmus, who reigned over the land of Kabul, and the Banu Shanlan, 10,000 warlike chiefs, each ruling over 100 walled cities, and 100 citadels, and he was suzerain, also over 7 vassal princes, and tribute was brought to him from the broad lands between east and west. He was just and equitable in his rule, and Allah Almighty had given him all this, and had bestowed on him such mighty empire, yet had he not vouchsafed him a son, though this was his dearest wish, to inherit the kingdom after his decrease. So one day, it befell that he summoned the Olima and astrologers, the mathematicians and almanac makers, and said, "Draw me my horoscope, and look if Allah will grant me a son to succeed me." Accordingly, they consulted their books and calculated his dominant star and the aspects thereof, after which they said to him, "Know, O king, that thou shalt be blessed with a son, but by none other than the daughter of the king of Khorasan." Hearing this, Tagmas joyed with exceeding joy, and bestowing on the astrologers and wizards treasures beyond numbering or reckoning, dismissed them. His chief wazir was a renowned warrior by name Ain Zar, who was equal to 1,000 cavaliers in battle. So him he summoned, and repeating to him what the astrologers had predicted, he said, "O wazir, it is my will that thou equip thee for a march to Khorasan, and demand for me the hand of its king, Barwan's daughter." Receiving these orders, the wazir at once proceeded to get ready for the journey, and encamped without the town with his troops and braves and retinues, whilst King Tagmas made ready as presents for the king of Khorasan 1,500 loads of silk and precious stones, pearls and rubies and other gems, besides gold and silver. And he also prepared a prodigious quantity of all that goeth to the equipment of a bride. Then, loading them upon camels and mules, delivered them to Ainzar with a letter to the following purport. After invoking the blessings of heaven, King Tagmas to King Barwan greeted, "Know that we have taken counsel with the astrologers and sages and mathematicians, and they tell us that we shall have boon of a boy child, and that by none other than by thy daughter. Wherefore I have dispatched unto thee my wazir Ainzar with great store of bridal gear, and I have appointed him to stand in my stead and to enter into the marriage contract in my name. Furthermore, I desire that of thy favor thou wilt grant him his request without stay or delay, for it is my own and only graciousness thou showest him. I take for myself, but beware of crossing me in this, for know, O King Barwan, that Allah hath bestowed upon me the kingdom of Kabul, and hath given me dominion over the Banu Shalan, and vouchsafed me a mighty empire. And if I marry thy daughter, we will be, I and thou, as one thing in kingship. And I will send thee every year as much treasure as will suffice thee. And this is my desire of thee." Then King Tagmas sealed the letter with his own ring, and gave it to the wazir, who departed with a great company, and journeyed till he drew near the capital of Khorasan. When King Barwan heard of his approach, he dispatched his principal emirs to meet him, and a convoy of food and drink and other requisites, including forage for the steeds. So they fared forth with the train till they met the wazir. Then, alighting without the city, they exchanged salutations and abode there, eating and drinking 10 days, at the end of which time they mounted and rode on into the town, where they were met by King Barwan, who came out to greet the wazir of King Tagmas, and alighting, embraced him and carried him into his citadel. Then Ainzar brought out the presents and laid them forth before King Barwan, together with the letter of King Tagmas, which when the king read and understood, with joy exceeding, and welcomed the wazir, saying, "Rejoice in winning thy wish, and know that if King Tagmas sought of me my life, verily I would have given it to him." Then he went in forthright to his daughter and her mother and his kinfolk, and acquainting them with the king of Kabul's demand, sought counsel of them. And they said, "Do what seemeth good to thee." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 500th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that King Barwan consulted his daughter and her mother and the kinfolk, and they said, 'Do what seemeth good to thee.' So he returned straightway to the minister Ainzar, and notified to him that his desire had been fulfilled. And the wazir abode with him 2 months, at the end of which time he said to him, "We beseech thee to bestow upon us that wherefore we came, so we may depart to our own land." "I hear and I obey," said the king. Then he prepared all the gear wanted for the wedding, and when this was done, he assembled his wazirs and his emirs and his grandees of his realm, and the monks and the priests, who tied the knot of marriage between his daughter and King Tagmas by proxy. And King Barwan bade decorate the city after the goodliest fashion, and spread the streets with carpets. Then he equipped his daughter for the journey, and gave her all manner of presents and rarities, and precious metals, such as none may describe. And Izar departed with the princess to his own country. When the news of their approach reached King Tegmas, he bade celebrate the wedding festivities, and adorn the city, after which he went in unto the princess, and abated her maidenhead. Nor was it long before she conceived by him, and accomplishing her month, bare a man-child, like the moon on the night of its full. When King Tegmas knew that his wife had given birth to a goodly son, he rejoiced with exceeding joy, and summoning the sages and astrologers and mathematicians, said to them, I would that you draw the horoscope of the newborn child, with its ascendant and its aspects, and acquaint me what shall befall him in his lifetime. So they made their calculations, and found them favorable, but that he would in his 15th year be exposed to perils and hardships, and that if he survived, he would be happy and fortunate, and become a greater king than his father, and more powerful. The king rejoiced greatly in this prediction, and named the boy Janshah. Then he delivered him to the nurses, wet and dry, who reared him excellently well till he reached his 5th year, when his father taught him to read the Evangel, and instructed him in the art of arms, and lunge of lance, and sway of sword, so that in less than 7 years he wont to ride a hunting and a chasing. He became a doughty champion, perfect in all the science of the cavalarice, and his father was delighted to hear of his knightly prowess. It chanced one day that King Tegmas and his son, accompanied by the troop, rode out for sport into the wolds and wilds, and hunted till mid-afternoon of the 3rd day, when the prince startled a gazelle of a rare color, which fled before him. So he gave chase to it, followed by 7 of King Tegmas's white slaves, all mounted on swift steeds, and rode at speed after the gazelle, which fled before them till she brought them to the seashore. They all ran at her to take her as their quarry, but she escaped from them, and throwing herself into the waves. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 501st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Janshah and the Mamelukes ran at the gazelle to take her as their quarry, she escaped from them, and throwing herself into the waves, swam out to a fishing bark that was moored near the shore, and sprang on board. Janshah and his followers dismounted, and boarding the board, made prize of the gazelle, and were minded to return to the shore with her, when the prince espied a great island in the offing, and said to his merry men, I have a longing to visit yonder island. They answered, We hear and obey, and sailed on till they came to the island, where they landed, and amused themselves with exploring the place. Then they again embarked, and taking with them the gazelle, set out to return homeward. But the murk of the evening overtook them, and they missed their way on the main. Moreover, a strong wind arose and drove the boat into mid-ocean, so when they awoke in the morning, they found themselves lost at sea. Such was their case. But as regards King Tegmas, when he missed his son, he commanded his troops to make search for them in separate bodies. So they dispersed on all sides, and a company of them, coming to the seashore, found there the prince's white slave, whom he had left in charge of the horses. They asked him what was come of his master and the other 6, and he told them what had passed. Whereupon they took him with them, and returned to the king, and acquainted him with what they had learnt. When Tegmas heard the report, he wept with sore weeping, and cast the crown from his head, biting his hands for vexation. Then he rose forthward, and wrote letters, and dispatched them to all the islands of the sea. Moreover, he got together 100 ships, and filled them with troops, sent them to sail about in quest of Janshah, when he himself withdrew with his troops to his capital, where he abode in sore concern. As for Janshah's mother, when she heard of his loss, she buffeted her face, and began the mourning ceremonies for her son, making sure that he was dead. Meanwhile, Janshah and his men ceased not driving before the wind, and those in search of them cruised about for 10 days. Finding no trace, they returned and reported failure to the king. But a stiff gale caught the prince's craft, which went spooning till they made a second island, where they landed and they walked about. Presently they came upon a spring of running water in the midst of the island, and saw from afar a man sitting hard by it. So they went up to him and saluted him, and he returned their salam, speaking in a voice like a whistle of a bird. Whilst Janshah stood marvelling at the man's speech, he looked right and left, and suddenly split himself in twain, and each half went a different way. Then there came down from the hills a multitude of men of all kinds, beyond count and reckoning, and they no sooner reached the spring than each one divided into 2 halves, and rushed on Janshah and his Mamelukes to eat them. When the voyagers saw this, they turned and fled seawards, but the cannibals pursued them, and caught and ate 3 of the slaves, leaving only 3 slaves who were with Janshah when he reached the boat in safety. Then launching her, made for the water, and sailed nights and days, not knowing where their ship went. They killed the gazelle, and lived on her flesh, till the winds drove them to the 3rd island, which was full of trees and waters and flower gardens, and orchards laden with all fashion of fruit, and streams that strayed under the tree shade. Brief, the place was a Garden of Eden. The island pleased the prince, and he said to his companions, "Which of you will land and explore?" Then said one of the slaves, "That will I do." And he replied, "This thing may not be. You must all land and explore the place while I abide in the boat." So he sat there ashore, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 502nd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the prince set them ashore, and they searched the island east and west, but found no one. Then they fared on inland to the heart thereof, till they came to a castle, compassed about with ramparts of white marble, within which was the palace of the clearest crystal, and set in its centre a garden containing all manner of fruits beyond description, both fresh and dry, and flowers of grateful odor, and trees and birds singing upon the boughs. Amiddlemost the garden was a vast basin of water, and beside it a great open hall with a raised dais, whereon stood a number of stools surrounding a throne of red gold, studded with all kinds of jewels, and especially rubies. Seeing the beauty of the castle and of the garden, they entered and explored in all directions, but found no one there. So after rummaging the castle, they returned to Janshah, and told him what they had seen. When he heard the report, he cried, "Needs must I solace myself with a sight of it." So he landed and accompanied them to the palace, which he entered marveling at the goodliness of the place. Then they visited every part of the gardens, and ate of the fruits, and continued walking till it waxed dark. And they returned to the estrade, and stood down, Janshah on the throne in the center, and the 3 others on the stools ranged to the right and the left. Then the prince there seated called to mind his separation from his father's throne city, and country, and friends, and kinsfolk, and he fell a-weeping, and lamenting over their loss, whilst his men wept around him. And as they were thus sorrowful, behold, they heard a mighty clamor, and there came from seaward, and looking in the direction of the clamor, saw a multitude of apes, as they were swarming locusts. Now the castle and the island belonged to these apes, who, finding the strangers' boat moored to the strand, had scuttled it, and after repaired to the palace, where they came upon Janshah and his men seated. Here the serpent queen again broke off her recital, saying, "All this, O Hashib, was told to Bulukiya by the young man sitting between the 2 tombs." Quoth Hashib, "And what did Janshah with the apes?" So the queen resumed her tale. He and his men were sore affrighted at the appearance of the apes, but a company of them came up from the throne whereon he sat, and kissing the earth before him, stood a while in his presence with their paws upon their breasts in a posture of respect. Then another troop brought to the castle gazelles, which they had slaughtered and skinned, and roasting pieces of flesh till fit for food. They laid them on platters of gold and silver, and spreading the table, made signs to Janshah and his men to eat. The prince and his followers came down from their seats and ate, and the apes ate with them till they were satisfied, when the apes took away the meat and set on fruits, which they partook, and blessed Allah, the Most Highest. Then Janshah asked the apes by signs what they were and to whom the palace belonged, and they answered him by signals. Know ye not that this island belonged of yore to our Lord Solomon, son of David, on both of whom be peace? And he used to come hither once every year for his solace. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease the telling of these tales for today, till it be morrow.